Good evening. This is the January 15th, 2025, the New Year Land Use Committee meeting. I'm Jay Rosapepe, City Council member, and I'll ask everybody to introduce themselves, please.
Scott Diener, council member 3.
Eric Warden, council member 4.
Nick Bond, Community Development Director.
Jim Fisk, Principal Planner.
We have a published agenda. Does there have any deletions or additions that people would like to bring up? With that being a no, why don't we move into the first item there, either Jim or Nick?
Yeah, I'll take the first one. So the Puget Sound Energy has been doing some research on putting in some public EV charging stations in Port Orchard. And so we had a survey open. I forget when that survey closed, but the results are summarized in a slide deck that was included in your packet. And the takeaway was there were strong preferences for facilities either in one of two downtown locations, as well as there's a location we identified up at Givens, the Givens Center at Givens Field, where this could easily be installed. And so we've been talking to PSE about next steps, and we wanted to check in with the Land Use Committee, but we've essentially told PSE we're comfortable proceeding with two of the locations, probably the Given Center, as long as it is feasible from a technical standpoint, and then one of the two downtown sites, either on Prospect Street in front of the new 730 building, or on Klein there, diagonal or across the street from where the police park their vehicles in the City Hall parking lot. And so I think that they're going to come back, and once they have their technical analysis, I think we're going to see two of those three go forward, unless there are objections from council, or if you feel like the whole council needs to review and weigh in on this. We had a pretty limited turnout. I think PSE sort of discounted the locations that were in front of residences. They didn't want to take up parking in front of somebody's house for EV parking. And so they kind of, even though those are part of the survey, they scored low. And then on top of that, PSE just said, these really don't make sense. In a couple of instances, they looked at polls that were nearby the locations that were in the survey, because the exact location in the survey didn't have, it was either a telecommunications line rather than a power line. So it wasn't their poll to install something on. But I think we'll end up with two of them, and it's just a matter of doing the technical analysis now.
Like some feedback. I feel comfortable with moving ahead. This is a very low-key project. But if we want to take it to council for comments, that would certainly be the next council meeting. I don't think that would be a super delay. Do you, Nick?
Well, except that I'm going to be gone for the next two council meetings, so my ability to present this is probably limited unless I have somebody go in my place. So I think if you report on it during your committee reports, that's probably adequate. And if somebody wants to put it onto an agenda, then we could bring it to a February council meeting.
Yeah, I just was looking at the idea of moving ahead so we can get these in, because more and more electrics are out there.
Yeah, so I think I've zoomed in on the slide deck here, and let me try to make this just a little bit bigger. The location on Klein here, this is the pole outside of the 600 Kitsap building where the city has some offices. And then this is, I don't think we want this one right at City Hall, because you can only get one charging space off of this pole, being that it's located at the alley. This is the other one that I think is probably viable, and this is at the Givens Field, and you could do a double charger off of this pole, as long as there's adequate power supply and the upgrades aren't too significant if there's some sort of transformer or other upgrade. So PSE seemed pretty confident on Klein and Givens. We're still looking at a couple of other poles on Prospect across from the 730 and the 740 Prospect build, or 720 Prospect building. But these ones are actually used by the residences that are above some of the businesses on Bay Street, and so we thought that would probably interfere with existing users who don't currently appear to have EVs. And the pole on the other side of the street is owned by the PUD. So PSE would have to put in a new pole that they own in order for that to have EV chargers on it.
Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, thanks. Two questions. One, if there's vandalism or whatnot, that's up to PSC to take care of and replace at their expense.
Correct.
So-
This is all PSE. We're just giving them permission to install this in our right of way.
Okay. Second of all, second question, sorry, is this something that council votes on?
Council is there will be a contract brought forward that council will have to approve this once we proceed. So this is really just a check-in to verify what would be in the contract that gives PSE permission to do this work. And I think PSE wants a 10-year commitment from the city that these can be in place for 10 years as a kind of a minimum timeline. I don't quote me on the number of years, but I think that's what I recall them saying. And then we would also have to do a minor modification to our parking code so that these would be EV only parking stalls, and we'd have to put up the signs that say EVs parking only. And then we'd probably make it a 4-hour zone for those stalls to ensure that people are cycling through them and not staying there for extended periods of time.
So if there's no risk to the city, why does it go to a council vote versus just a decision that the department heads make?
Because it's a contract and council approves all contracts
Okay.
unless
Okay.
that authority has been delegated to staff either through the budget or through some other process.
Okay, just learning process. So thanks.
Mhm.
As far as I'm concerned, I'm not sure how Scott feels, but I say we just move forward with this. Pretty cut and dry to me. So
Yeah, I don't disagree. It's pretty straightforward. We've got good analytics going into the spots. So I feel like we should just move forward with it, and then when the contract comes forward, we'll let people know that was what the briefing was about. Is this
Go
an
ahead, Pat.
annual program? That was my question, Nick. This is just a drop in the bucket? Does PSE plan on doing more?
Yeah, I think they have quite a bit of grant money to deploy this throughout the region, and so this is their first foray into this in Port Orchard, but they're doing this all over the region, and I think that there is probably additional money available in future years, but for now, this is their first bite at it.
Okay.
So Nick, my last question would be on the one at Givens, did you say we had possibility for a double charger?
Yeah, so the pole is in between two different parking
Right.
stalls, and so depending, obviously some vehicles have charging ports on one side or the other, and the cord should be able to reach, but that people may have to back in as opposed to pulling in frontwards in order to connect.
No, that'd be great. I mean, essentially if we put two off of one pole.
Yeah, and it would be a double incline as well. So the incline it would have
Ah,
we
okay.
would mark it so that the pole divides two parking stalls, and in front of the pole is one and behind the pole is the other. So we'd probably put down some paint that just demarcates two 20 or 25-foot parking stalls.
Okay, I misunderstood. Thank you very much. Scott, you still got your hand up.
Yeah, I just had one quick question just for my awareness. The picture of the lady that's plugging into a white car, the PSC Up and Go Electric.
Yeah.
So the cord is retractable upon payment. So there's a motor that winds that cord all the way up.
That is my understanding is you sign in through the app, and as soon as you punch in your code, it will lower it to you and then you plug in.
Huh. Okay, I
And-
like that the
and-
box is out of the way. I like all of that. It will be clear for enforcement to tell if somebody's using that space for charging or not. That's for sure.
Mhm.
I think my last question would be, you said there was a 10-year contract that they're looking for, Nick. I would assume always a bad thing that as technology changes and they would all upgrade on that, much similar to Eric's question about vandalism, taking care of that.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll all be spelled out in the contract. I'm not terribly concerned about technology changing. I know there are a number of different charging ports, but they sell adapters, and so if you have a vehicle that has one charging port. You carry an adapter for the other type.
Any other questions on this one?
Nope, I like the new design. It seems to help with vandalism and avoiding pedestrian conflicts. I like that.
All right. I think we kicked that one down the pathway. So, second item, Jim or Nick?
Yeah, I'll take the second one. I'll let Jim have critical areas here in a minute. On page 14 of your packet, you'll see a memo that has been written to summarize the survey results from our public outreach on the Sherman Avenue Stormwater Park. And so I believe that, first of all, we had really good participation. I think that Sean and Connor in our planning department, they did a more extensive outreach effort than we have ever done as a city before, except maybe when we've had our consultant do mailers. We mailed notices to every property owner within the boundary. We also, to make sure that apartment tenants were notified of the process, we did door hangers. And so we went to each apartment complex with the permission of the property manager and hung door hangers so that people were alerted to the opportunity to participate. And so turnout was very good, especially considering the size of the geographic area that we're dealing with. I don't think there are a whole lot of major surprises in the survey result, although I think the types of amenities are starting to come into focus in terms of, we asked a question about what is your most preferred and what is your least preferred amenity. And it seems like pretty universally walking and running trails are pretty popular, as is playground equipment in terms of people, we let people rank their lowest priority as well as their highest priority. And so you'll see two tables in there on page 19. The skateboard, skate dot, pump track, those types of improvements did not have a ton of support. We also we had some emailed suggestions. One person who lives near the park would really like to see a Frisbee golf course, which I think is going to be difficult in this location, but I think it's possible to look at it. I think, though, that the Frisbee golf probably precludes walking trails because we're threading the needle through all of the wetlands, critical areas, and then stormwater ponds for our regional facility. I think you're going to end up with discs in critical areas or in storm fenced or potentially unfenced ponds where people are trying to fish them out, and that's probably not an ideal situation, but it may be worth exploring a little bit further. Our staff has kind of honed in on a couple of preferred alternatives in the next steps section of the memo on page 22. And we'd like to start coming up with some concepts and just sort of loosely outlining what a trail and conservation park would look like, what a family nature park would look like, and what a community garden and recreation park would look like. And so we like to come up with 3 different concepts. Initially, they'll be very high level, meet and engage with the community, as well as I believe we're going to be putting together a steering committee on this. And so the idea is let's introduce some alternatives, get feedback, and then just like we did with the McCormick Village Park, we can choose one of the 3 alternatives, or we can kind of come up with a hybrid approach based on what people like about each of the elements. If there's a way to kind of create a mashup of 2 or more of the alternatives.
Nick, remind me, what's the acreage that we're talking about?
I believe it's like 19 acres, and I think that more than half of it is encumbered as critical areas. And then the stormwater design that Ian Smith had put together before he left the city also consumed some of that land. And so there is room to get trails around the stormwater features and along some of our buffers. But we're pretty constrained in terms of what we can do. We do have plenty of room to put in an access point in a parking lot and kind of a park entrance, like where there could be a playground or some other features. And then once you go further out into the park, I would envision it to be more of a walking trail, either connecting to community gardens or some other sort of possible amenity.
Well,
If you
then
go
I'll
to
just follow up and say that given the constraints that you just mentioned, Nick, it feels like what we're talking about as preferred development is kind of right-sized for the park.
if you go to page 27, Scott.
Yeah, I'm there.
Yeah, you can see, for lack of a better word, usable area,
Yeah.
and that makes a difference. Eric, I know you got your hand raised. Just hang on for a second. So that, that kind of plays into it because I know that Nick, you had talked about at one point in time, uh, at least exploring down the road. I know that's not for the park about possibility of a connection to Ruby Creek, to access,
Mhm.
over 16, which I assume would be way down the road.
Yeah, I think we would have to kind of flesh that out as part of our next park plan update because that is not currently in the park plan, but I think it's a reasonable leap to take to try to connect these two areas.
Eric?
Yeah. Are there, are we gonna install detention ponds in there, or are we gonna do some vaults with some controlled flow? What's our approach on that?
I think there's some flexibility still. The key thing is that they have to be sized appropriately for the amount of stormwater that we're going to be dealing with. And so our Public Works Department has done some analysis, and at least initially they were proposing detention ponds. But I do think that with some of the other stormwater park examples, there could be alternative stormwater
Yeah.
features if they can deliver the same type of capacity as a detention pond. And so that's more of a technical issue to walk out. And I think the parks plan probably needs to say, we'd really like to see this if it is feasible, but then an engineer actually has to go and show their work and design it.
Yeah, because some of the thought to put into it is if you do put a detention pond in there, you're gonna have to have probably control structures or whatnot. And if you do that, you're gonna have to have access, right, for vector trucks. That's a good opportunity if you're gonna have walking paths or pathways,
Mhm.
to utilize those pathways for maintenance access as well. So you can kind of incorporate it. Not a huge fan of, the stormwater ponds only because of, holding water and whatnot. And it's not the safest thing in the world, but I guess if they're fenced off, they're fenced off.
Yeah, I think the requirement for fencing is largely dependent on the slopes
Slope.
surrounding or going into the ponds. And so if you can design it with a gradual enough slope, you can leave it open, which makes it a little bit more of an amenity.
Mhm.
But with the terrain that we have at this site, I suspect it's going to have to be fenced if it's a
That's what,
detention pond.
yeah. So as is my only, when I was looking at it, I was thinking, and you guys mentioned possible some walking paths, and I thought if you're gonna do that, maybe we could possibly incorporate maintenance access into that. So
I
Yeah.
think it's worth it if we can to get to vault detention versus pond detention.
and if you're doing vault detention, I don't know what you think about pergolas, gazebos, things like that. It might welcome some overnight visitors.
Yeah.
But those slabs can be used for picnic tables, all kinds of things as well.
Yeah. I think Manchester did a really good job.
Now even a basketball hoop on some of them, because some of those
Yeah.
vaults are pretty large. But yeah, there's a lot of ways to incorporate it, different things in there. I'm excited to see what you guys do with it.
Yeah, definitely. So I just scrolled up to the three examples, and I did want to remind the committee. I think that I'm not sure that any of you were here when this happened. It was several years ago, but we did have a group looking to put a community garden in one of our Port Orchard parks a number of years ago, and we couldn't really find a location that worked for them. And so there was interest in this community garden concept and potentially setting up a place where people could have a community garden. And so, that is at least an intriguing concept. And even if we don't go with the community garden as the theme of the park, maybe it is a feature that could still be incorporated into any one of these alternatives.
Additional comments?
Nope, I'm glad we're moving forward on this. I recall talking about it, and it's nice to see that there's follow-on actions.
Have we put together the committee that's going to be working on this? Is Mark Trineri involved on that? I know he wanted to be on the steering committee. Just curious.
Yeah, I recall I think that sounds familiar to me, but I have to go back and look at my notes. It's been a while since we had that conversation.
I think that's roughly, from what I understand, the community he lives in. So he wanted to
Yeah.
Sure.
kind of be a voice for that. So
Yeah, so I think it's probably appropriate that we call together the steering committee for an initial meeting, either maybe end of February, early March, to sort of review the survey results. And then I'm going to have our staff start working on just some concepts and other things that we can start as a discussion point as we try to prepare materials for public viewing. So I suspect that we will call that committee together here in the next 45 or so days.
nice. Looking forward to it.
So one last comment on this is I noticed you got 80 replies. And the reason I bring that up, Eric, since you haven't seen some of our survey results, we got, I think it was like for fireworks when we did the survey in 2022, it was 180 replies, and we considered that a real, that wasn't too bad a response. So getting 80 replies is pretty darn good for just the fact that it was a limited area. So nice outreach work, Nick.
Thank you.
Next item.
Critical areas, the stuff
Critical
of
areas.
dreams.
Yes, we love this. So we just adopted the 2024 comprehensive plan, the periodic update. So as part of the implementation, we're required to update our critical areas ordinance, the POMC 20.162. The amendments that are proposed are intended to ensure compliance with GMA and integrate best available science for the protection of critical areas, which include wetlands, critical aquifer recharge areas, fish and wildlife habitat conservation areas, frequently flooded areas, geologically hazardous areas, steep slopes. So we introduced the draft CAO to the Planning Commission in December, a clean version and a red line version. Those were both included in your packet tonight. We had some discussion in December. We revisited again Monday night, actually. Same packet, same material that you're seeing. We had our consultant come in and provide some answers to the technical questions. So that was a pretty good discussion. And so really this update, there's really 4 or 5 main points, which is reorganizing the code to streamline the ordinance so it's more user-friendly, updating some buffer standards to align with ecology's recommendations, creating a wetland mitigation hierarchy, and then there's some stream buffer terminology, replacing stream buffer with riparian management zone. And those RMZs, we're going to have to update some of the buffers associated with those to satisfy Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife requirements. And so they have a couple different ways to measure it. One based on tree growth, like the maximum height a tree can grow in an old growth forest, which is problematic because it becomes site specific and it's difficult to apply that universally across the city. So we've taken a different approach, similar to the counties, where these buffers will increase, but they're not quite that large. So as we're continuing to revise the CAO, we'll have some more discussion with the Planning Commission in February. We have received some comments on it. We're producing a comment matrix similar to what we did with the comp plan, so that we can address those comments and tell the public and the commission how we either incorporated those comments or not, and why. So we anticipate having additional discussion with revisions proposed in February, and then having a public hearing in March. And so at some point in the future, this would come before the council for approval. The effective date of that, we're thinking, would be late this year or even the first of next year. So wanted to get the CAO in front of you so that you could take a look at it, review it, be familiar with it before we proceed.
Scott?
Well, he answered one of my questions, which was the methodology. The other question, I guess, that I have is, have you, I know it's still relatively early on, but Have you had involvement by the tribes? Have they commented on the approach the city's taking?
We actually received a comment from the tribe as part of our comprehensive plan adoption, and it was very much geared toward the critical areas ordinance. And so at the time, we weren't prepared to release our draft of the CAO, but since then we have provided the draft to the tribe, and I've not heard anything from them in response to that. But I
Which
anticipate
tribe?
Suquamish is the one
Suquamish tribe.
who commented on the comp plan, but it was in the context of the critical areas code. And we said, look, we've been given
Right.
additional time to complete this. We're going to release a draft soon and we'll send it to you. So we're waiting for comments from them.
Yeah, just so you know, the county's critical area ordinance has been appealed by two different parties. The Kitsap Environmental Coalition and also the Port Gamble S'Klallam tribe. And Port Gamble S'Klallam tribe's argument was that we should be using site potential tree height. And we didn't, as you know. So that's one appeal. We also created an urban version, which would have maintained the current critical area buffers for wetlands at 150 feet, or sorry, for streams at 150 feet for fish-bearing streams. And they didn't like that we kept things status quo in the UGAs. So I don't know if that's a harbinger of things to come. Not necessarily the urban exception, but maybe the site potential tree height issue. But they have to create standing.
Luckily, the county covers more area than we do.
Good information to have. So I wanted to also let you know that this is going to be on the agenda for work study next week with the full city council. And really, we're just, we have some light agendas here at the beginning of the year. And so we're trying to use those meetings to make sure that we're sort of preparing you for the onslaught of code revisions that are to come this spring. And we're going to try to get this one out of the way. I do expect probably some further revisions, potentially from the comments that we've received that the Planning Commission is going to have to work through. But this at least will get you familiar with what is going to be likely to change, and will hopefully make the adoption process a little easier when we're ready to bring that forward for adoption.
And as Nick noted, at work study, our consultant, Chad Wallen at Grady Associates, he will also attend. So if you have some more technical questions, he certainly can answer those better than I could.
Let the games begin. Eric, any comments? Okay. Next item.
I am just scrolling to the very end of the packet here to figure out what page it starts on. And there were
99.
There we go. Oh, I've got 192.
Oh,
192 for park impact fees.
Yep. I'm sorry, I was going to the table.
There you go. Okay, so I included a memo in the packet, and this is something that we're looking for guidance from the land use committee in terms of when and how you want to take this for discussion to the full city council. My recommendation at this point, because we also have to amend our school impact fee schedule, and we're currently working on a transportation impact fee update. I'd like to take each of these to the council separately, because I don't want to confuse council members with the varying methodologies that are used for transportation. The school is choosing to go a different direction than what I'm recommending in parks. And so I think it is easier for us to take these in bite-sized pieces. And I believe the school impact fee discussion will be ready to start in March and probably be completed in April. I think parks is probably ready to occur now. And so I'm suggesting that if the committee wants to report to the council next, I guess, a week from Tuesday, you can let them know that we're going to have a discussion on or we're going to be bringing forward an ordinance for consideration and a public hearing on this, and that the land use committee was either comfortable or has a preference in terms of the direction that we want to go. So to go to the beginning of the memo, the legislature passed Senate Bill 5258, which changed the requirements for how our impact fees are structured. The city is required by June 30th of this year to adopt impact fee schedules that comply with this new law, and that the fees have to be based either on the number of trips generated for a project for transportation impact fees. There is no trip generation for the other types of fees. And then for schools and parks, it has to be either based on square footage or the number of bedrooms within a residence. And so initially, I was leaning on parks with going with the square footage model. And as I started looking at the numbers, it started to concern me a little bit more to use that model. And so I'm leaning now towards the per bedroom model as being an easier one for our city to administer. But I'll walk you through the methodology here. The city's current rate structure was based on an equivalent level of service based on persons per household. So every person we determined had an impact that was like $3,300 that had to be paid. And then we look at the different persons per household numbers for each housing type, and we're able to come up with a table in Figure 1, which has since been adjusted annually by the CPI. And so I'm going to share my screen as I'm walking through here. So based on our persons per household number for the ELOS in the Parks plan, the single family residential impact fee is currently at $62.51. And then all of the other building types were actually, these are just based on the persons per household number that we have from OFM. And so we just prorated based on occupancy to come up with these other numbers, with the exception of the ADU, which OFM doesn't have an estimate for ADUs in terms of what occupancy looks like. So our thinking was that it is very easy to take our existing methodology, look at the average household size or the average number of bedrooms of houses in the city, and essentially convert our persons per household impact fee structure into either a square footage impact fee structure or a per bedroom impact fee structure. So we started looking at the square footage alternative first, and we have data going back 21 years in our permit system that tells us what square footages of home have been built. One of the things we realized was that we don't distinguish between finished and unfinished space in those numbers. And so our permitting data doesn't tell us whether a house had an unfinished basement, which is pretty uncommon these days, or whether it's a 2 or a 3-car garage. And so there's differing square footages associated with these unfinished spaces, which could cause a 2-bedroom house with a 3-car garage to pay more than a 5-bedroom house with no car garage. And so it seemed like there were some potential problems with the square footage approach. The other thing that we saw with square footage is that our housing sizes changed pretty radically starting around 2016 when building resumed at McCormick Woods. There was not a lot of housing built in McCormick Woods prior to annexation in 2009 or 2010. And so the average that you see from 2004 to 2016 is almost entirely on the east side of Highway 16. And then McCormick resumed construction, average household sizes went up, and then of course we had the pandemic, and now we have high interest rates, and so things have stayed relatively elevated in terms of the average house size since that period. So the alternatives that I presented, looking at a 2, 4, 6, 10, or 21-year average house size, I'm just saying let's throw out the 21 and the 10-year average because housing size has changed significantly in that time, but actually persons per household really hasn't changed quite as much during that time. When you then do the extrapolation, well, so first of all, to deal with the question of garages, I think the vast majority of new houses are being built with a garage, even if it's a 1 or a 2-car garage. I'm just proposing that we assume a 500 square foot average because I think most houses have kind of an oversized 2-car garage, and quite a few houses have a 3-car garage these days. And 500 felt like a round number that could be taken kind of off the top, so that we would only be assessing a fee based on the finished square footage in the house. That doesn't address the possibility of unfinished basements or other unique situations with a custom home plan. If there's a storeroom or somebody might try to argue that a storage closet is not part of their finished space, or who knows what sort of argument could be made. But in any event, when you take the average square footage over the 2-year average or the 4-year average or the 6-year average, you come up with a per square foot cost for an impact fee ranging from $2.37 up to $2.44. So it's not I guess it becomes a big difference once you get to scale, but it doesn't seem like a lot just looking at the per square foot charge. We next moved into the bedroom alternative, and we don't have data going back quite as far on the number of bedrooms in a home. And we similarly saw that there was an uptick, although it really occurred in 2020 with the start of the pandemic and people working from home and teleworking, and has sort of continued where even today with higher interest rates and higher construction costs, house sizes today are still higher than they were 10 years ago. So I think you could use any one of these four averages on the number of bedrooms. And we went through and determined that we range between 3.7 and 4 bedrooms on average per household, depending on which average we use. And then the impact fee based on those averages comes out between $1,559 per bedroom up to $1,697 per bedroom. And I'm going to this is a table that my finance department requested because they actually want to project forward based on what we've built historically and kind of make sure that our revenues are going to come in on target, which we believe they are. But I included a table here in the packet, and the top of the table shows if you use the square footage example, I just plugged in these various rates to a bunch of different housing types and different housing sizes. The square footage rate really sends large houses skyrocketing in terms of cost. And for all small houses and middle housing types and apartments, the fee actually goes down. I also think that if you look at the range from the lowest number on here at $948 up to the highest number at $11,850, I really question whether the actual usage of our parks by the people who are living in these houses is proportionate to the numbers that this table has spit out. And so when you compare that to the per bedroom approach, first of all, the highest fee for a 5,000 square foot house, which we have very few of those, is not quite as high, and the lowest fee is not quite as low. So this kind of keeps the numbers a little bit tighter to our existing fee schedule. And I think that probably I think the bedroom approach is going to be provide a little bit more stability in terms of making sure that the revenue that we need to build the portion of the community event center funded by impact fees and some of our other commitments that we've made, if revenues don't come in as projected, we're potentially having to extend contracts and delay things. And I think that the per bedroom approach is probably a safer approach from a revenue perspective. I do think the square footage approach is going to encourage more middle housing. And so if it's the city council's objective to really throw gasoline on the fire of middle housing, and that's a terrible analogy this week, I apologize. But anyway, if you really want to encourage middle housing, I think the square footage approach does that. But I do worry that this is going to slow down housing at kind of the higher end of the construction spectrum, and we could end up seeing lower revenue generation out of this model. And so I think that the per bedroom approach is a safer approach. And the other thing to note is that our pros plan is due for an update in 3 years. So we're going to be revisiting this in 3 years anyway. So we'd be complying with the law. I think taking a more measured approach to implementing the law and then sort of reevaluating this as part of our next pros plan update. So my recommendation in the end of the memo was to use the per bedroom approach, and it's I think the 4-year average, that's actually the lowest rate per bedroom. I think that's going to get the least pushback from the development community, and because we're sort of changing our rate structure in the middle without doing a full-blown impact fee study, I feel like that's also the safest action for us to take as we try to comply with the law while we wait 3 years for our next pros plan update.
So I'm going to jump in if it's okay. A couple things for Eric, I'm sure already know this. There's been a commitment by the council up to this period of time of making sure that impact fees cover our ongoing expansion. In other words, people that already live in Port Orchard aren't paying for those new amenities that are required. You know, we don't spread the pain all the way around. It's basically to the houses and development that's coming in. I think that's a fair way of stating that. The second thing is when I look at the table, Nick, you know, and I look at the bedroom parking fees, so some of them go up and then some of them go down. Is that correct in the assessment when I look at the 4-year average?
Yeah, the lines that say 2-year net, 4-year net, that's actually the variation from our current rate. And
Right.
so I think the variation is much lower on the per bedroom. But if you look at single family homes, which are the first 4 lines here, the small homes go down and the big homes go up. But that's true of every housing type where the bigger units pay a little bit more and the smaller units pay a little bit less, which is probably more commensurate with the actual impact of uh, for park users on our parks.
No, but my point of it is a lot of times we've seen, I don't want to say a lot, but you know, sometimes instead of something going down, they'll keep it where it's at and raise the other ones up. In this case, we would actually adjust our fees on the different type of housing, correct? Under
Correct.
this model. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Eric, go for it.
Couple things. One, the apartments, we're treating condos per bedroom, but we're treating apartments basically a door is a door. We're not treating those, if I can see it accurately. It's a one price fits all. 3 bedrooms is the same as a 1 bedroom or a studio. Is that accurate?
No, so the you're gonna so a 3-bedroom apartment is gonna pay 1,500. So it doesn't even matter the housing type. I'm only plugging the housing types in now because our current rate structure is by housing type, and so I'm
Yeah.
doing a comparison between our current rate and what it would be under the new scenario. But under the
Okay.
new scenario, it doesn't matter what the housing type is. It only matters how many bedrooms you have, and you're paying $1,559 per bedroom. And so an apartment pays that per bedroom, a house pays that per bedroom, and
Fine.
there's no distinction.
I like I like the per bedroom route that you're describing. That kind of makes a little bit more sense. How many bodies we're bringing into the community. Now we're just talking about restructuring the rates. We're not talking about raising the rates, correct? Because we just raised the rates a couple years ago. Is that accurate?
Correct. We're basically using our existing rate structure and we're converting that structure into a methodology that complies with state law, but it's based on our current rates, and some of the fees go up, but some of them go down, and they should equalize when they're applied. But bigger houses will pay more, smaller houses will pay less than what the current fee is.
Yeah, I definitely I think the bedroom rate is a little bit more because it's just cut and dry versus like you stated, you know, with basements and garages, all that kind of jazz. So my opinion is I like the bedroom aspect.
Scott.
I agree with everything that's been spoken so far. I look at the square foot impact, particularly for the 5,000 square foot home, but the others as well. That's nearly a 50% increase. It's not moderated really all that well, and is I think going to be difficult to defend, especially when we're looking at reviewing impact fees with the pros plan. So I like the 4-year average. I think that's Nick, you laid out a good argument for why we should run with that now. And I'm good with that. One comment I have on the green font is it's a little difficult to read unless I blow it up, just so you know. Looks like
Use a different color, the harder green or bold it.
I will make that change before this goes to council. And
How do we treat this? This may be going down a rabbit hole. How do you treat bonus rooms? Because I hate to say it, a lot of people use bonus rooms as bedrooms, and
my understanding under the building code is if it has a closet and a door, it is a
okay,
bedroom,
that's
and it
what
has to
that's
have
what
egress,
that's what you, okay,
a
that's
window
fair.
of a sufficient size. So,
Yeah.
we're going to rely on that piece of information.
Okay. Yeah,
So
I told you.
there's one more part of this that would also come forward with the impact fee rate adjustment, and that is the law also requires, and I don't know what the legislature was up to, but it seems like the people working on ADUs and the people working on middle housing did not do a great job of coordinating. But they also passed a law that said the rate for an accessory dwelling unit cannot exceed 50% of the rate for the principal structure to which the accessory dwelling unit is an accessory use. And so the way that we're going to handle that, we are showing here that this rate structure at $1,559 per bedroom would apply to ADUs. However, for ADUs, we are going to propose some code language that says that if the principal house, we will calculate the what would be the impact fee on the principal house, even though it may already be existing, to make sure that we're not violating state law. And if the impact fee that we're charging on the ADU is more than half of what it would be on the house, we will then reduce that fee. And so we're still working out the details of the attorney on exactly how that is written and structured. But that's the other piece of this that has to go forward. But our plan is to rely on this per bedroom rate first, and then have a relief valve to comply with this other law on ADUs, which the law here on middle housing, where we have to go to this per bedroom approach, it seems like it's already lowering the cost of an ADU relative to other building types, but they want to just cap it even further for that particular housing type, and I'm not quite sure why, because it's already getting a pretty significant reduction.
So if I read your table correct, Nick, on that one, saying that a single family home, 2-bedroom, 4-year average is like 3,100, and that might, okay, so you'd run into an issue then. Wait a minute, if I'm reading the table wrong, maybe reading the table wrong. Then you'd only run into an issue if there was a 2-bedroom home, for example. Not
A 2 or a 3-bedroom home is going to reduce the fee lower than the current rate, but a 3 or a 2-bedroom home will reduce the rate, but the 4-bedroom home is going to pay more. And that's probably, we're seeing an average of 3.7 to 4 bedrooms a house right now. I think most houses are going to probably pay 62.36 going forward, which is almost exactly in line with the current rate. And actually that is a reduction. It should be green. It's a reduction by $14.
Yeah, so but I was saying is for an ADU, you'd only run into that issue if you had a 2-bedroom ADU. Otherwise, your 1-bedroom ADU studio.
I see. Yes.
Yeah, it's not going to be that many. I understand what you're saying, but we probably won't run into that very much.
Yeah, 2-bedroom ADUs are probably going to be uncommon, and it's possible it's going to be associated with a 5-bedroom house. And so if it's behind a 5-bedroom house, then it's not going to hit 50%. But if it's behind a 2-bedroom house, it will hit the 50%.
I just want to make sure I understood that correctly. Sorry for the committee for running down that. Thank you.
Yeah. So is this something that you feel like you can recommend to the city council and bring this forward for action, or do you think this needs to go to a work study meeting? And the reason I ask about work study is our February work study meeting is filling up, and this is not quite ready to go for next week. So my hope is to bring this forward at the first meeting in January without it having been to work study, and relying on the land use committee's recommendation for the 4-year average per bedroom fee.
I'll be honest. I would bring this to, depending on how quick we need to implement this, I would bring it to work study in February.
Okay.
I think there'd be some additional questions. We've got a pretty good handle on it, but for hitting people the first time, I think it could be a longer discussion than trying to have it at a council meeting. Eric and Scott?
Yeah, I mean, I think I hope it doesn't take a whole lot longer than what we just discussed right now, because
you just want to bring it to a council meeting then?
I think it's, I mean, not that complex. I think if he did a presentation at the council meeting. Oh, you won't be there though, will you, Nick?
I'll be there in February for the February meeting where we'd be taking this up. But the alternative is I could take it to another committee. I could take this to the finance committee, and I don't recall who's on that. but I think the membership is quite different than this committee. So
It
that way,
is.
most of the council would have seen it by the time it goes forward.
Can you
Yeah,
get the
it's just-
finance committee,
Go ahead.
when do we need to have this published?
So we don't need to have it published until June 30th, but because we also have to do the school fees and the transportation fees, I'm trying to get this one out of the way first, and then the
That's-
school fees, and then
Right.
transportation.
What I'm just saying is, when do you want to, okay, I understand the published part, but when do you want to get it completed by is my question.
Ideally, we would have this wrapped up by March. So I can try to squeeze it onto the work study agenda for February. I just know that there's already 4 things on there, and so it'll be a heavy meeting. But
Okay, why don't you work with the mayor on it and either go, if we have a lesser council meeting, you know, where we could have some time just in case, or bring it to work study. And I
All
like
right.
your idea of taking it to finance if you can do that.
All right, sounds good. And I did want to let you know that I'm going to meet with the Home Builders Association tomorrow on this, and so I'm going to walk them through kind of what we're proposing and make sure that they understand it and know that we don't have a whole lot of choice here with the change in state law.
Could you give us some feedback on that through an email?
Yes, let me make myself a note to
Just,
do that.
you know, just a couple of lines if you could. Since impact fees and us with the Builders Association, it's always been a contentious relationship. Eric,
Are we on par with our neighbors on what they're, not the county necessarily, but Bremerton, Paulsbo, are we on par with them, or are we ballpark?
No, we're quite a bit higher than those jurisdictions, and
Okay.
um, and we also have significantly more growth, and so the amount of park facilities needed for our growing population compared to the amount of growth that those other jurisdictions are seeing is quite different. Our parks are also just in much worse condition as a baseline in terms of needed improvements and other capacity upgrades.
Are we using park impact fees to upgrade our parks? Or
We are.
doing
So,
just-
so in the Parks and Recreation plan, there's an appendix that includes a project list that,
Mhm.
so essentially we decided that either 25% or 50%, I don't remember which one we settled on, but some percentage of our total capital project list that is related to growth is being funded with impact fees, with the rest of the money being assumed is coming from grants or other funding sources. And so we wrote a parks plan, we created a project list, we figured out what percentage of each of those projects is related to growth, and then that total growth percentage, we said we're going to fund 50% of this with impact fees, and the rest of the money will have to come from the state, which the RCO is one of the grant funding offices. They give grants that are usually 50% of a project cost. So it is pretty easy to get a 50% match from the state on most of these things. And so the percentage of the community event center project is in here. The downtown plazas are in here. The stormwater park is in here. There's a whole long list of various park improvements that we're planning. And so the first things we're going to spend money on are the stormwater park and the community event center and downtown plazas. And
That's what I was wondering.
and that's going to tie up our money probably for the next 6 years. And then once we get past that period, we will have additional money and we'll have to choose what park project goes next.
That's what I was wondering. So as of now, our dollars are going towards the plaza, community center, stormwater park.
Yeah, and
After
the
that-
Givens Park improvements as well for the sport court project.
Then after that, basically, like you stated, whatever, roughly 6 years, whatever's left over, we'll start trying to improve our local parks.
Correct. Correct. And we're, the funding agency, they require that we have an update to our parks plan every 6 years in order to remain eligible for funding. So we're going to start the parks plan update again, probably at the end of 2026 with a goal to adopt by the end of 2027. That way we won't lose any eligibility to apply for grants. And then we can sort of reprioritize our parks projects at that time. And that should be once the community event center and plazas are hopefully under construction. And we'll try to prioritize projects as part of that process.
okay, last item, quarterly inspection report.
So this was just included. Uh-oh, I'm sharing my screen and I'm not even sharing the right document anymore. Um, the inspection report that was provided, um, our plans examiner is proving to be very proficient with SmartGov and in generating reports. And so we just wanted to include a report that showed kind of the year over year inspection activity for the city. And so this just shows kind of month over month what we did in terms of inspection workload, and it's really just provided as a for your information. I don't have a whole lot of in the way of conclusions on this, other than they're doing a ton of inspections for 3 people, and then our consultants who we have on call who help out. I know that some of you work in other government agencies and probably do a fair number of or at least have some idea of what your inspection workloads are, but I don't know how this compares to what the county does. But you know,
Well,
10 inspections a day for one inspector is a lot.
Yeah,
I really, hate this because I used to be involved in statistics, and when I taught statistics, I always said it's not what the statistics show you, it's what they don't show you. So this is good information, but I had like a lot of questions compared to, okay, how does it compare to last, what is the trend? Like you showed us the 10-year trend. My other thing would be discrepancies found, how many, didn't pass inspections, so to speak, where it had
that
to
was
be
my question as well.
re-inspections. So it's nice to show workload, and I'm surprised how consistent it is, quite frankly, over the, month to month, because of weather and stuff like that. But I got a lot of questions that I don't even want to go down that rabbit hole right now. We don't have enough time at tonight's meeting, but it's a start. So I appreciate you bringing this to it, because this is the first time we've seen something like this. So as we
Yeah.
get there, it's great. It's a start.
If there is other information that you would like to see, I can ask them about it and see what we can build into the report. I assume they can pull this information from previous years as well, but I think that this was just kind of a year-end report that was run to show what we did last year.
Okay. Any comments
Sure.
before we wrap up? Because I have one comment I want to make, not about, it's a total separate off of this topic. Scott?
Yeah, I too was just curious about D8 inspections. One of the things that Nick, you probably have thought about is what do those DA inspections look like, and can they help inform on better project submittals, more for the first pass yield of review? Something to think about if you haven't already.
Good feedback.
Any last comments before I make my comment?
No, thank you for this information.
Yeah. I don't know who, I would assume it falls under the building inspectors. I have a bugaboo, partly from, work I'm doing now. And that is basically roofers and, siders, wearing the appropriate safety gear. And the reason I bring that up is I've noticed a lot more compliance lately in that arena. So I don't know if it's because of additional inspections or people are being a lot more a lot safer. But I really do appreciate it, seeing that out there. In other words, potential for injuries and stuff is a lot less. So, thank you to whoever's doing that or emphasizing that.
Or
in the
Ellen and I
building.
made a drive-by maybe.
Yeah, it's, but we have inspectors out there also. So yeah, it's good to see.
Yeah, I can certainly ask. I haven't heard anything that it's coming from us, but it very well may be.
Well, I'm just saying is it's great that, that people are adhering to that, and that, hopefully is due to the inspection, part of the inspections. Anything else for the good of the order? So where are you going, Nick? What are your travels?
Oh, I've got a snowboarding trip next week. I'm flying to Japan and going to Hokkaido to
You going with
experience.
Scott?
No.
I'm gonna be there too.
Really.
Yeah, I'm going to Niseko week 1 and Hokkaido week 2.
I'm in Niseko the week after next, but we've got a snowcat booked in Iowani, which is like on the west coast of Hokkaido. just south of Sapporo. So I'm flying to Tokyo Sunday, and then we make our way up to Niseko the following Saturday.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm flying out Thursday. And then so I've got a friend who's staying there in Tokyo. He's one of the contractors. He's over there for a bit. So I'll be staying with him on weekends. But in the weeks in between, I'll be skiing and looking for a heli skiing trip as well. Well, maybe even cat skiing in
Nice.
Hokkaido.
So Eric and I will be living vicariously through
Yeah.
you two gentlemen.
Yeah. These new hips aren't going skiing right now.
Yeah,
No.
no, neither is mine.
Nope.
Jim, anything for the good of the order on your end?
I just want to make sure that, because I bombarded you with a bunch of emails, Jay.
Okay.
Did the first one go through? Because I asked IT to increase your mailbox limit, and I was
The
thinking
first
at your
one.
end, it was probably a disaster with all those emails. So,
Why don't I touch base with you tomorrow on it? Okay.
all right.
See what I'm supposed to have and not have, because I don't see a lot of stuff here.
Hmm.
So let's talk tomorrow. Okay.
Okay, I'm available.
What's your direct?
Since this is being recorded,
I was
how
gonna say, let's
about
publish
Okay. Yeah. After you
Can we
stop.
adjourn here real quick?
Yes. We're adjourned. Stop recording.